What a game 7 between the Milwaukee Bucks and Brooklyn Nets. But it feels so unfulfilling that this series ended the way it did, which is basically on a KD turnaround / fadeaway 3-point shot against Jrue Holiday. It just feels so unfulfilling that he takes that shot, he airballs it, and it's basically the series is over. I know they call a foul or something like that with 0.3 seconds left. I don't even know what happened there. The announcers didn't seem to know what happened there. But it's just, like I said, it's such a hollow feeling. Because I thought watching live, and I had no horse in this race. I didn't care either way who won. But watching live, when Kevin Durant hit that first turnaround 3-point shot at the end of regulation, I thought that was a 3-pointer. I thought that was going to be the series. And it would have been epic. It would have gone down as one of the all-time clutch shots in, I mean, it's exaggerating a little bit. It would have felt like one of the all-time great shots in the moment if it had been a 3-pointer and if they had won the series that way. But instead, his toe was on the line, and it's a 2-pointer, and we go to overtime, and the Brooklyn Nets end up losing. You can't fault Kevin Durant. I think he had 48 points. And he didn't have great efficiency because you could see he was very tired at the very end of the game. And the ball kept slipping out of his hands quite often throughout the game. I don't know if he was doing that just to try to draw fouls or whatnot, but I felt like that was happening throughout the entire game. But late in the game, some of the shots you think he would hit when driving towards the rim, he wasn't driving straight on because he had to avoid Brook Lopez, of course, but some of the shots where he was driving towards the rim, you would have expected him to normally make. He wasn't hitting them. And obviously the air ball at the very end, you have to feel like his legs were probably just gone at that point. And again, you can't blame him because he had no help. Really no help at all. The Nets did not have a single bench player score. I think they only had 3 bench players come into the game, but they didn't have any points off the bench. Harden, and you have to give Harden credit for playing through the injury, by the way. I think in an ordinary situation, would not have seen the court at any point during this series if it was not a playoff elimination, situation. And of course, if Kyrie Irving was playing, I don't think he would have come back. But Harden was just not, he didn't have it. He did not have it. I mean, he couldn't shoot. He couldn't drive to the basket. His outside shot wasn't there. He just was not shooting at anywhere near what we would expect from him. Joe Harris has been pretty awful most of this series. And tonight was a little bit better. I think he had 3 threes, but it still was not good. Blake Griffin had a solid night offensively. Blake Griffin had a solid night all around, actually. I really like the role they played him in against Giannis and against Milwaukee this series. Of course, he fouls out, I believe early in overtime, along with PJ Tucker. But, I thought Blake Griffin had a solid role. But outside of Blake Griffin and Kevin Durant, you weren't getting much from the Brooklyn Nets. I think Harden still had a pretty decent point total, even though his shooting was awful throughout the night. So there's just that. And for Milwaukee, Giannis was very good. Giannis had much better efficiency than Kevin Durant, but obviously Kevin Durant shooting turnaround 3-pointers is much different than the shots Giannis is going to be okay to take. But Giannis had a 40-point game, big night for him. Brook Lopez is a great night, very good at shooting efficiency, and he's also tremendous. Comes up with a highlight play that maybe in the moment was underemphasized, but that block in Kevin Durant will really go down as one of the turning points in this game. Well, I don't know if you can necessarily call it a turning point because it was so late in the game, but it will go down as one of the plays that helped put Milwaukee past the Brooklyn Nets and on to the next round, on to the Eastern Conference Finals. They don't know they're even going to face yet. He said Hawks and Sixers are going to a Game 7, so a really good number of playoff series here on the Eastern Conference side so far. Other thoughts, Jrue Holiday was not good early in the game, but he turned on in the fourth quarter. Late in the fourth quarter, when they needed him the most, he showed up, and he was great then. You think he had back-to-back shots he made? I don't know if it was back-to-back for sure, but I remember seeing at least 2 shots he made where, that really put Milwaukee in a situation where they could actually compete here late in the game. And Chris Middleton, who I've said is a better closer at the end of games than Giannis Antetokounmpo, one of the 2 guys who I know made shots for Brooklyn in overtime along with Giannis himself. And Chris Middleton was not great on the night, but really came alive in the second half, helped Milwaukee out quite a bit. And I think he is, to me, he's a more versatile offensive threat than Giannis is. And I'm just going to say it like that. I think Chris Middleton can score from almost anywhere. He's good at getting his own shot. He can play off ball, on ball. I really like what he does offensively in terms of versatility. And Giannis just is not that right now. Neither is Jrue Holiday because Middleton has the bigger build. I think he's more of a locked-in shooter too, from basically all over the court. So I give a lot of credit to Milton for what he did in the second half. And like I said, it was just a deeper performance for Milwaukee than it was for the Nets. I think Milwaukee had maybe 9 points off their bench. And then, of course, like I said, Drew Holiday, good in the fourth quarter. Brook Lopez, good for the whole game. Giannis, good for the whole game. Chris Middleton, good in the second half. You didn't get that from Brooklyn. You just did not have that happen. You had Blake Griffin, who was solid, and you had Kevin Durant, who was obviously a beast. But you didn't have that third and fourth guy. I mean, maybe you throw James Harden out there because sometimes he got to the free throw line. He drew a lot of fouls, which is what James Harden's really good at. But he usually scores a lot too, and he just wasn't capable of doing that tonight. The big what ifs will always be, well, what if Kevin Durant had been a centimeter further back and had hit the three-pointer at the end of the game in regulation and just won the game out right there? Because I know Milwaukee had another possession, but they didn't score on it. That would be a big what if. And of course, the biggest what if will be, what if the big three were healthy for Brooklyn? Because think about all the injuries they've had happen. They were never really together on the court during the regular season that much, which really to me doesn't matter. You're a great player, you'll figure it out. You have chemistry. You talk with the guys off the court, you'll figure it out. The issue became, they didn't have these three. I mean, these three guys were not healthy together on the court for more than a minute this entire series. And that's just crazy to me that you could never get your three-star players, Durant, Irving, and Harden, out there together during this playoff series. And it really destroyed them. Because if they had Kyrie Irving healthy, I don't think Harden even plays for the rest of this playoff series. I think they probably win, they being Brooklyn, probably win this series in 6 games instead of having to go to 7 and end up losing. You also have to think about, LaMarcus Aldridge. LaMarcus Aldridge retires midseason, obviously for good reason. I'm not mocking LaMarcus Aldridge for deciding to retire. You have to do what you have to do, and he was in a situation that was obviously very scary for him. So I'm not trying to throw any shade on LaMarcus Aldridge here. But if he had been healthy, like I say, if injuries had not bit them as a whole this year, if Aldridge had been healthy enough to play throughout the season and not have to retire for his own health, for his own medical concerns, then you're in a situation where you got LaMarcus Aldridge. That's really good size inside. He's a decent three-point shooter. He's added to his game recently. So it's a very different situation. But, that's just a huge what if. There's nothing you can really do about that. Milwaukee is advancing to the Eastern Conference Finals for the first time in the Giannis Antetokounmpo era. And Mike Budenholzer is probably breathing a sigh of relief because I think this secures his job for at least next year. There was certainly a lot of discussion that, if they lost here to Brooklyn, that maybe he'd be out, and you see guys like maybe Rick Carlisle or something like that move in here and maybe start talking about going to Milwaukee. But that's not going to happen now. I think he's pretty secure now in his spot in Milwaukee for at least another year. And there's nothing really much to talk about at this point. I think we've covered everything. I think PJ Tucker and Drew Holiday did a really good job on Kevin Durant. I think so did Chris Middleton, to be honest. From watching what they did against him defensively, and obviously he's going to get his, and he got a lot of points this game. All things considered, I was really impressed with how they played against Kevin Durant. I really was. I thought they played him really well. And as far as playing Giannis, I think they played Giannis fairly well in the other end too, and Giannis still got 40. But for the most part, not the entirety of the game, but there was instances where they faltered. But I think that for the most part, they played fairly well defensively against him. The issues became when other players started knocking down shots like Milton in the second half and Drew Holiday in the fourth quarter. When those guys started hitting those shots, they just didn't have an answer for that. And if Blake Griffin pulls up and shoots a three-pointer, if Brook Lopez pulls up and shoots a three-pointer, you're just not going to block that shot. You're just not going to do that if you're the Brooklyn Nets. So there's really nothing you could do about that in particular. So overall, I thought it was a really good game, honestly. It was a great game, great excitement, great energy, potentially a lot of drama there. It just stinks that Kevin Durant goes from shooting what could have been the game-winning shot if he had just been a little further back at the end of regulation to airballing what could have been the game-winning shot in overtime. That's just going to be a storyline. He's not going to get blamed for it, obviously, because, again, he's been banged up. He was on the floor a lot this game. He was getting knocked around quite a bit, really throwing his body around there. Certainly does not look like a guy who tore his Achilles 2 years ago. Shelton looks much better than that. Arguably the best player in the world right now. But just didn't have enough in the tank to pull a banged-up Brooklyn Nets team past the second round of the playoffs.